everybody. This is the Freethinking Femmes Podcast. My name is Raina Dunham, co-host and co-founder of Freethinking Femmes. I'm a Houston resident and for nearly a decade and a Metro Houston native. Since Houston is so large and spread out, we've demonstrated a lot of need for strong female leadership in the secular community. I am volunteering to be one of those voices. I am joined by one diverse voice. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Hi, everyone, again, and thank you for coming back for episode 2. I'm Deanna Adams. I serve on the board of Houston Black Nonbelievers, which is a local organization created to support African American free thinkers in Houston. And I also blog on the WordPress site Musings on a Limb, where I express my views as an African American atheist professional mom on subjects related to the intersectionality of racism and skepticism.
Excellent. The purpose of Freethinking Femmes Podcast is to provide our communities with a way to discuss the very real, current, and important issues with a venue of discussion for those in the secular community. We are here to lift up the voiceless, the women, the LGBTQ, the people of color, anyone who's basically not in the mainstream that doesn't really get a voice. Basically, we're here to say you're not alone. We recognize the struggle. We fight it with you and for you.
Exactly. And on that note, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that our thoughts are definitely with the victims and the victims' families of the Charleston shooting that happened earlier this week, where 9 African American churchgoers were gunned down in their house of worship by a self-described white supremacist. So we definitely hope the best for those families, and hope that they're able to move forward, and hope that we as a country are able to move forward as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. That's pretty horrific. Like, you're almost out of words when these things happen. I mean, I struggle to find words myself, to be honest. Definitely want to send our condolences and be looking for, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of stuck. Just not knowing what to say or how to feel, other than just horrified that 9 people lost their lives over something like that.
Yeah, that's a prevailing thought, actually, in the community. A lot of us, even those of us who write a lot and those of us who blog, we don't know what to say anymore. I haven't written a new essay on this particular case just because, I've said these things so many times. And, I mean, we'll get into a lot of it later, but definitely that's a prevailing notion that's being felt across the country. We're out of words. We don't know where else to go from there. So hopefully we'll find the words, and hopefully we'll move forward, and something's just got to change. I mean, it just has to.
Right. Okay. We'd also kind of be remiss to not be appreciative of the tropical storm or depression or whatever it ended up being, Bill, not being even half as worse as they expected from what it seems. It did hit us. We did get some rain, but we got less rain than we did in all of the weeks of storms beforehand, and I'm guessing they're calling it the Great Flood of Texas in 2015. Bill did not contribute nearly as much as those storms, so we definitely got lucky there. On behalf of the state of Texas, I would just like to thank the earth for that, because we definitely didn't need much more rain.
Definitely.
Some other news is it looks like there was an audit by the Better Business Bureau of the Houston Food Bank, and they were rated among the top in the nation, I believe the top 9 or something like that. So they have a tremendous program going on, and only 2% of the funds that they receive go to administrative overhead, 2% go to fundraising, and 96% of their funds go to their actual programs, per the audit that they did in 2013 and 2014, which is very recent. So, yay!
Yes, very good job, guys. Very good job.
Yeah, and we can provide a link to that audit so that they can see exactly what the BBB went over in the description when we post this. So look for the description if you want to check that out. Yeah, Wendy Davis looks like she's doing a group focusing on reproductive rights and similar things based here in Texas. She's hoping to get that off the ground in the next few months from what it looks like. So that's going to be pretty exciting. She hasn't gone away. She's still around, and she still wants to fight for our right to choose for ourselves what we do with our bodies. So that's going to be tremendous.
Exactly. I'm really glad to hear that. And she said that the focus would be productive rights, which include reproductive rights. So I'm really interested to see exactly how that takes shape for her, like what the focus will be and the different areas that she'll be involved in. But we're definitely lucky to have her still be here and still be active and still fight for women's rights, productive and reproductive, apparently.
Right. Yeah. I'm definitely looking forward to that, because every group that we have that focuses on that is going to be just awesome. So, yay. Once again. Also, it looks like the maternal death rates for the U.S. are going up instead of going down. The global trend is downward, except in the U.S. As far as what's called the Western nations, Western world, which they don't really clarify that too much, but the article that I'm referring to where it talks about that is going to be in the description as well. So that it's due to the policies where we don't have access to make decisions about our bodies, and we don't have access to health care to make good decisions for our bodies. So everything that we've been trying to say in the pro-choice movement and the pro-bodily autonomy movement is it's being demonstrated when they review how our moms and babies are faring.
Speaking of babies.
Yeah, speaking of babies. Definitely.
So yeah, I think it's sad. I mean, it's sad that we're one of the, supposedly the top nations in the world, and our maternal death rate is going up. Those are things that you see in underdeveloped countries where there's not a lot of access to health care, not a lot of prenatal care, and things like that, so that problems can be spotted earlier. So, seeing that it's going up here, it just underscores the fact that healthcare really has become, in the U.S., as far as I'm concerned, it's become kind of a privilege, not a right. And there's a lot of people that don't have that privilege to have good healthcare.
Right. They don't have the privilege of having the kind of job that gives them that type of care automatically.
Exactly.
Or they have an employer that's fighting the Obamacare requirements to cover such care, because it is considered preventative to have prenatal care and maternal care for the mother, to have those being provided by their insurance company, whether they got it through the marketplace or whatever. Companies are apparently fighting those requirements mainly for women's access to health care.
Right.
Very specific things specific to reproduction. And that affects their ability to work. So I really don't understand that.
No, and it really just doesn't make sense on a lot of different levels. But that reminds me, and forgive me, my mind's been in other places, as you'll hear soon. But there's actually a Supreme Court case that's going on right now that's going to decide a key aspect of the Affordable Care Act as well. So we're definitely watching that. I don't believe an answer has come down on it yet, but as soon as it does, we'll definitely keep you guys posted about that. And I just remembered it was a couple of days ago that I saw that they were deliberating it. So,
oh, okay. Yeah,
we're still, on the fighting pieces of the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Years later.
Yeah. I mean, it's doing some good at least. So, hopefully the Supreme Court will land on the side of the people.
Hope so. Hopefully they'll reverse the gains that we've had. And even here in Texas, where we weren't able to do the Medicaid expansion because our governor at the time refused the federal money, we still need help. We still need the pieces that are still in place here, especially for those who have employer-sponsored health care. At least those pieces and the protections that they're afforded are still enforceable. So we definitely don't need any parts of it to be rolled back at this point.
No, we should definitely be going forward in the direction, because it's been demonstrated over and over again, the better the coverage, the more likely they are to prevent a lot of those health situations from getting worse, and therefore the overall cost of healthcare is much lower. Now, obviously, the exemptions to that would be things like when people develop cancer, like children, for example, and stuff like that. There's only so much you can do to prevent that, but a lot of things that keep, healthcare very costly are not doing the preventative care.
Right.
And getting care without insurance and then not being able to pay it, and then that drives everybody else's premiums up. So we're already paying for it. So we might as well just give everyone care.
Exactly. I agree.
So Medicare, Medicaid, whichever it is, I always get those two mixed up. I'm sorry. For all, just give everybody healthcare so that we can exist. You know, we're here, we're people that exist currently, not the potential life we are currently. You know, people with personhood in existence right now. So let's be able to go to the doctor when we have the sniffles or if we have concerns. Like, hey, you know, I felt a lump in my breast. What do I do now? Those types of things. Preventative care is crucial to good health, especially dental. Dental should be a basic part of healthcare, and it's not. It's actually separate. But
right.
That's me going on a tangent.
No, I mean, it's important, and you're right. With dental, there have been studies that show that, you know, periodontal disease can lead to heart disease. I mean, our bodies are all connected, you know, to itself. All of the systems in our bodies are connected. So if we neglect one part because we can't afford it, and I know a lot of people that don't have basic dental coverage, and, you know, they go on to have other issues because of their teeth, you know, and they think that it's just cosmetic, but it's not. It's connected. You know, it's definitely connected. And I think, just my personal tangent, I think the worst thing in the world is having medical care attached to what job you have.
Yeah.
I can't understand that. And I'm very fortunate, you know, I have a good job and I have good medical insurance, but why does that make me any more worthy of medical care than someone who doesn't? I've never understood.
Like a stay-at-home mom.
Who came up with that? Right.
But she stays at home to provide care. Now, hopefully that was her choice to do it, and it wasn't just an economic decision.
Exactly.
Because daycare is so costly as well. So, yeah, it's all very interconnected, and I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because to kind of run with that tangent a little bit, that goes back to what you said in your intro, where you're discussing the intersectionality of things. Healthcare is intersectional to our existence, without things expounding upon that, you know. So, yeah.
Definitely.
I could talk about that all day.
Wait, we need a healthcare episode.
We do. We definitely do. Okay. So, we kind of sort of touched on this, I believe, in the first episode, but something that we're seeing all over the place in the news and everywhere right now is just demonstration after demonstration of how the United States of America is not a post-racial society. We still have all kinds of skeletons that are basically coming out of the closet in a very visual format. And I don't think it's that it didn't exist this entire time. I think, in the contrary, it's something that's existed this entire time. But now we have the technology for the globe to really see all those skeletons. And for our people to see those skeletons that weren't already seeing it. People like myself and the white community that like to pretend that it didn't exist this entire time.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you say that, because I was actually listening to Tupac. I have a hardcore rap station that I work out to, and a Tupac song came on earlier, and it was, I think it's The Way It Is, and, you know, he was killed in 1996, and he was talking about people being murdered by the police in the black community and them getting, you know, a star for it instead of getting, you know, reprimanded or arrested or, you know, whatever. They were getting an attaboy. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, nothing has changed. I mean, that's kind of how you feel, like exactly what you said. Nothing has really changed. We just see it more often now. You know, we have camera phones now. We have, you know, video and YouTube and Facebook, and we're getting the word out now. So it's in our faces, you know, and It's something that we've been talking about for years and years and years and years. But like you said, it was kind of I don't know if it was a well-kept secret, but it wasn't what it is now. So I don't know. I mean, let's go into, I guess, some just data.
Okay.
Like we said at the beginning, it's hard right now, and I hope I don't just sound like a blubbering idiot for the rest of this episode. I'm heartbroken, and stringing words together to make sense of things like this is just really, really hard.
Right.
But let's talk about just police brutality on a whole. There's an infographic online, and we'll post the link to this in the comment section. But it's called A Neutral Look at Police Brutality: What the Police Have to Say. And a couple of things that stood out to me is 43% of police officers were surveyed for this. 43% of them agreed with the statement, "Always following the rules is not compatible with getting the job done." 25% of police officers surveyed stated that they've witnessed fellow officers harassing a citizen, most likely because of his or her race. 52% agreed with the statement, "It's not unusual for a police officer to turn a blind eye to improper conduct by other officers." Yeah, I feel like I'm running through these, but if you just listen to this statement, and it kind of begs the question, where are the good cops? A lot of people say, well, all cops aren't that way. As far as I'm concerned, and this is Deanna speaking, right now, as far as I'm concerned, even if you're not the trigger man, you're not a good cop if you stand next to the trigger man and you let him do the things that are harming other people unnecessarily.
Right, and when it is your job to be the public protector and you're not protecting, that kind of stands to reason and gives us the reason to question, well, what are you doing then? If you're not protecting the public, then what are you doing?
Exactly. And what makes you good?
Right. It's the same argument, not to Godwin's Law or anything, but the same argument was literally made for, well, not all Germans were Nazis. But that doesn't mean that the Germans that didn't stand up and help all the people that were being persecuted and literally murdered were necessarily good people or doing it for the right reason.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that they were scared, and I understand that people today are scared of the cops, but it's the people that are standing up and gaining ground for the rest of us at all. That's why we have a court ruling saying that, yes, we can record cops.
Exactly, and we need to.
Exactly.
We absolutely need to. This last one, I'll just end with this. Well, like I said, we'll put the infographic in the comments. There's lots more on this graph. It's very eye-opening. But there's one other one that I did want to mention and then go into some of the recent events is 49% of officers, that's nearly half of them, feel that the only way a criminal would receive any punishment was to punish the individual, him or herself. So that is so loaded. That is, for one thing, that's half of officers surveyed, basically. Just about half. It's saying that, first of all, they don't have any trust in the system themselves. They're a part of the system that they don't trust.
Right.
So they don't trust that if they do their jobs the way they're supposed to, if they get the bad guys, whoever the bad guys are, or if they, take the people that they feel are doing something wrong into custody in a humane way, they don't trust that the legal system will punish people who need to be punished if that's the goal. We could do a whole other show on punitive justice versus restorative justice.
Right.
But, if they feel that punishment is needed, they don't even trust the system that they're a part of. And so if you have a culture of officers that don't trust the system that they're a part of, where almost half of them feel like they have to take matters into their own hands, that's why we're where we are. I mean, that's one of the reasons. Of course, racism just blatantly is another. Talking about recent events, of course, the McKinney, Texas incident a few weeks ago at the beginning of summer, the beginning of June, where there was a pool party and the police were called out. Apparently, some people didn't want little, black teenagers in their neighborhood. And, I've been to McKinney. There aren't a lot of us there, but there are some. But apparently it was a problem on this particular day. So the police were called, and what ensued was on the grass and tries to round up basically all of the black teenagers. There was a white teenager who was filming this, was never told to sit down, was never told, to stop recording, was never cursed at or anything like that. But he recorded basically all the black teenagers being cursed at, yelled at, manhandled. And most egregiously, a 14 or 15-year-old girl being Miss Becton, actually, being
body slammed.
Yeah, I mean, body slammed basically on the grass by the officer. She was sitting down, and then he tells her to get down again, and she was already sitting down. And there's video, and I'm trying to speak clearly. It still makes me so angry, but there's video of her basically being, slammed to the ground and sat on by this police officer. When other teenagers come to try to help her or at least try to see what's going on, he pulls a gun on them. Obviously, these children are unarmed. They're mostly in swim trunks, and she's in a bikini. There's also a person an older man in the neighborhood who all over her while she's sitting there. I'm sure she doesn't know who this man is and why he's standing over her. It's angering. I mean, it's ridiculous. And one of the people that I follow, Alex Jules, he writes a blog on Pathos called The Graffiti Wall. And in his blog, well, the officer in McKinney, I can't remember his name for some reason right now, but Officer Case Bolt, he resigned a few days later. And Alex Jules wrote a really, really good piece on the fact that sudden resignation is a bad thing for Texas. And the reason it's a bad thing for Texas is because it pushes yet another incident under the carpet or under the rug, and it says, this was just one officer. This was a one-off. This was just something that happened. We got rid of him. Now go back to, your daily lives.
What I don't understand about the whole McKinney incident is they said that it was a party that had teenagers sneaking into the pool without passes, or they were doing something weird with the pool passes, because it's a neighborhood pool that required passes, or something like that. And there were people being very racist in their comments. There was an exchange, and then they're saying that the teenagers crawling over the walls, or not crawling over the walls, you know what I mean, jumping over the walls, trying to get into the pool without permission. It got out of hand. Someone called the cops. I understand that part of it, because teenagers will be teenagers. That doesn't mean you excuse it, but that also doesn't give the cops the right to manhandle teenagers just because they're being obnoxious.
Right, and I'm not even sure that that's what happened. I mean,
exactly.
There's other accounts that say, like you said, there were, I think there was 2 white women, and one of them actually has been fired from her job because of this. Like you said, being really rude to some of the kids that were at a private party.
Making racist comments. Someone told her to stop. She refused. I think that began a physical exchange. Again, the details aren't exactly there for me, because I'm still trying to sort that out,
Exactly, and that's the thing. It's like you hear 5 different stories.
Right, and I actually know someone who, that is her neighborhood, and she had to quit Facebook for a while because it was just so in her face. Because it was her neighborhood, and she was hearing all kinds of things, good and bad, about her neighborhood, and I would probably quit Facebook for a while too. But hearing her version of the events, and I don't say that to discount her personal experience, but hearing what she said, it didn't sound like she was there, but her neighbors were there, or knew more directly of the events, and it just doesn't make sense. It's the response to a bunch of teenagers running from a pool party, and then you body slam, and you only aggressively handle people of color, teenagers of color in this case, and yet all the white people across the street are just standing there watching the entire exchange. Never once does he yell at them, never once does he get mad at them. And I get that they're across the street, but that doesn't excuse him for being so unnecessarily aggressive with everyone else.
Right.
Whether they're residents or not, the cops don't always know that, to be honest, even if they've been in the community for a while. So to assume that he wasn't doing that to them, not because they were white, but because they were residents, I mean, there's really no way to know for sure other than he tells us and then we just take him at his word, and I really don't know what his word would be worth at this point, because he's never going to admit that his actions were wrong.
Right. And that basically feeds into a lot of what I'm researching now is the school to prison pipeline. And one of the things that I found is on the APA.org, the American Psychological Association website, there's a paper. It's dated March 6, 2014. And the title is Black Boys Viewed as Older and Less Innocent Than Whites, Research Finds. So, I mean, that's something we've known in the Black community. And a lot of the things, like we said at the beginning of this segment, we've known this in the Black community, even before Tupac. Right. Way back, we've known these things, and they're just now coming to light. But I think it's good that, an association like the American Psychological Association has done this study, because hopefully that can get some really, if not policy change, it can get at least the conversation started in a neutral, not necessarily finger pointing, kind of way. But basically what the study shows is that, our children and ours and African American children are seen as older, starting in pre-K.
Right.
They're disciplined more harshly. The words that are used to describe them are different. A lot of times you'll hear, especially for little Black girls, you'll hear sassy or bossy a lot of times, or belligerent. And, you'll hear those words even in pre-K and kindergarten. So it's a perception. It's something, it's an expectation that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy a lot of the times. But then it also comes up where if there are, two children that do the same behavior, one will be punished more harshly for it, and that sets them up kind of for the school to prison pipeline, which actually goes into the next kind of point of this. So in McKinney, you have 14 and 15-year-old children being, body slammed and treated like criminals, but that's the same thing that happens in schools, in the school system. And, you have truancy laws that prior to a week ago, actually, students of color were disproportionately given tickets and ending up in court because of missing school. So that's introducing them already, and I hope I'm making sense. I'm trying to make it fit together. But you would have, children of color disproportionately affected by these truancy laws, and so that was kind of setting them up for the school to prison pipeline, and it just kind of goes on and on and on. And it's basically, we're kind of talking about the intersectionality of it all and the progression. We see these things where in kindergarten, the little girl is called sassy. And so at 14, some people are saying, well, she shouldn't have mouthed off at the officer.
Right.
So she deserves to be, manhandled in a bikini. I mean, that part bothers me so much because I have a 14-year-old daughter.
Right.
And I just, every time I see her, especially the point when she was asking for her mother, I just see my daughter asking for me, and I cannot even imagine. But, so it's a progression, and it starts early, and it's, part of the perceptions that are out there that we have to tackle head on if we're going to change them. We have to admit that there is a perception problem about, what's expected of African Americans, what's expected of our behavior, our socioeconomic status, and those perceptions go into the treatment. Because if we don't talk about those things, then we can make laws all day long. But if we make laws that punish people for certain acts, we're still not getting at why they feel like it's okay for those acts.
Right.
So on that note, though, really quickly, I wanted to mention, as far as the truancy, in Texas, thankfully, Governor Abbott did sign the bill, House bill. Oh, I can't remember the number, I'm sorry. But the recent House bill that ended the criminalization of truancy. So truancy is now decriminalized in Texas, starting with the school year 2015-2016. It will now be a civil issue if it gets to that point. But the point now is to not issue tickets to students, to not have them in criminal court for missing school. The schools have more of an onus on them to find out why students are missing school, to provide them services to help them not miss school. And then if it does get to the point where they need judicial action, it's going to go to a civil court instead of a criminal court. So that is good news. That's, actually a really good start to stopping this whole school to prison pipeline thing. And of course, because Governor Abbott signed it, I know a lot of people that are kind of, all right, why?
Right.
What's the downside here? But just on its surface, it's a really, really good start. So I wanted to make sure that we at least mention that starting in this upcoming school year, truancy is no longer a criminal issue. It's a civil issue. And I think that's a good start because the school to prison pipeline is a whole, we could probably do a whole episode on that too. But it's a bad thing.
Right. Yeah. It kind of feeds into itself too. It leads into the self-fulfilling prophecy that lower income socioeconomic neighborhoods basically have more crime. Those tend to be largely people of color that live in those neighborhoods, thanks to all kinds of policies that lead into that. And then they tend to be lower paid than people of equal educational background and that happen to have paler skin. And then that just kind of leads into, oh, well, the neighborhood just happens to be black. Therefore, that's why we go and make trouble there. That's why we treat them like they're all criminals, because they all tend to be criminals. And so it just kind of bleeds into itself. It's this gaping wound in our country that we just, if we can't really talk about it, we can't really fix it. And we need to be able to say, we did this wrong. And we need to be able to say that in the white community. We did this wrong. We're treating them wrong. And we need to help fix it. What do you need us to do? What can we do together?
And that actually, that kind of goes into, what just happened in Charleston this week. A shooter, and there's so much, I don't know how much time we have left, but there's so much that went into that. But I think one of the things, Dylan, whatever his last name is, went in and shot 9 people because he has been indoctrinated with this white supremacy culture. He, spoke the words, "You're raping our women." I don't know how older people are, and 6 women and 3 men. I don't know how many of them are raping women, but, and you're taking over our country. These are words that are spoken on Fox News. They are taking over our country. We're going to take our country back. There's so many, and I will not take any responsibility away from himself. I will not say that he's mentally ill. No, as far as I'm concerned, he's a terrorist. He Definitely. Went there to inflict terror. He was making a statement, and he wanted to inflict terror on the rest of the community. That's the classic definition of a terrorist. Exactly. So I definitely won't take that away, and I will not say that he's mentally ill. I do wonder if there are some groups behind him, because it just seems like a little much for a 21-year-old to do by himself. And apparently, I just heard this morning he may have been a 10th grade dropout. So for a 10th grade dropout to write a manifesto, I'm just wondering, and I'm just throwing that out there. But I think what happens a lot of times, and going back to perception, is you see this coded language, this codified language where, an 18-year-old black child is labeled a man and a thug. And, that's a new N-word, basically, thug.
Right.
And, all these things. But then you see this 21-year-old white man who's reached the age of majority,
He's adult.
He's just a kid.
Right. And yet, legally, in every sense of the word, he is an adult.
Exactly.
His bones have fused. He has all legal rights, including he can rent a car, he can drink legally, he can rent a motel room. He can do all of the things legally that all older adults can do, and yet he's labeled a child. And that also goes back into other acts, like the Decker case. He was very clearly the same age as the girl that in McKinney that was body slammed, and yet she was just mouthing off and doing wrong, and yet Duggar was just a child. He had no idea what he was doing.
Right.
I beg to differ.
Curious.
I seriously beg to differ, because not only was he a repeat offender, but his family is the reason his victims will have no justice. because this quote-unquote child, which I'm sorry, if you've ever met a 14-year-old, they are far smarter than we give them credit for. That doesn't make them adults. That makes them on the path to be adults, because that's the very definition of adolescence.
Right.
That is...
the path to adulthood.
Exactly. So, yes, they're less rational than adults. I get that. But that does not make them adult just because they're a different color. And the psychology that you mentioned behind that is just so strange that, like, you know, the conversations you have to have with your sons and daughters in those communities on how to interact with the police are so completely different than what I was told. I was told growing up, you can trust the police. You go to the police. In neighborhoods of color, you're not told that. You're told, you know, you can't trust them. They are not there to help you. And not only does that break my heart, but that just infuriates me. Why? And that feeds into the psychology of them being more adult, because they're basically being forced into sometimes acting more adult when they're not necessarily there mentally. And chances are they're not there mentally, but they're forced into it. And all that does is create trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of trauma. It's weird, the conversations, you know, that we have to have. They're heartbreaking. I mean, they're definitely heartbreaking. I have a son and 2 daughters, and, you know, my youngest is afraid of police. Even before I said anything, because obviously I'm not going to tell a 5-year-old about what's going on and that, you know, people are being shot just because they're black.
Right.
You know, Walter Scott was shot in the back, running away, you know, and if there hadn't been video, once again, the officer would have gotten away with it. But, you know, so I don't tell her that, but we've gone in IHOP and she's seen officers sitting there, and, you know, at school they tell them in elementary school, these are your community helpers. But she knows something is different. She knows something just doesn't feel right. And she's like, no, I want to leave. She doesn't want to stay in a place where there are police officers, where people in the white community go to a place where there are police officers and they feel safer.
Right.
We don't feel safer anymore. It's almost as though, you know, we're going into the roughest, toughest neighborhood ever when we go into a place where there are police officers. And that's just heartbreaking. Like you said, it's heartbreaking, and it's wrong.
Right. It took us centuries to create the concept of childhood so that they could have more time to develop more fully their intelligence and lives more fully, and yet we're still fighting this fight of not actually allowing children to be children because of these racist issues that we still haven't worked through, because people refuse to believe they still exist, and I don't even know the full psychology of it all, but it's very infuriating that, you know, it just, you know, it's very cyclical and self-fulfilling, like I said. So, yeah, definitely. So we were having a good discussion, so I was letting us go over our originally determined time frame, because I think this is very important. We had some good discussion going, so I just kind of ran with it. But I am going to go ahead and cut it off here, because it does look like we've gone a decent amount of time over. And, you know, we could just sit here and talk about it, like, over and over and over for, like, hours, I'm sure. Eventually we would run out of something to say, because this has been going on for so long and so repeatedly, and it's almost the same formula. But everyone that tuned in, thank you so much for coming back for a second episode. We should be on schedule for another episode in about 2 weeks. That should be July 6th when it should be posted by. So please, you know, feel free to check out our links and give us any feedback that you may have. Good or bad, we want it. You can email us at freethinkingfemmes@gmail.com. That's going to be in the description as well. Whatever feedback you have, we would love to hear it. And just remember that there are people out there that need your assistance, that are going through some really difficult times. And if you're willing and able, please give to local groups. You know, groups like the Houston Area Women's Center that helps women who are going through domestic violence situations. The Houston Food Bank, as you can see, Houston Food Bank is kicking butt and helping people get food in their neediest moments. And that actually does include women that are going through some really hard times domestically, such as domestic violence cases. Any and all amounts of volunteer work and donations are always appreciated by those in need. It's always welcome for you to help them, and you're probably just going to make their day, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So we love you all, Houston, and we wish you a great, safe summer. Stay cool, stay safe, and stay thoughtful.